this image here. So we'll be reading this evening about error and the ego. That's the title of the section. For those of you that have been following along, this is really more about level confusion and more about the levels. And it is my desire to try to make this as clear as possible for everyone. Please do feel free to ask questions around the levels as we cover the material, because those questions really, if you're questioning it, probably several other people are too, and they provide like an on-ramp for greater clarity. So as you know, you're always welcome to ask questions. Which leads us to say hello and welcome to Miracles on High Plains. My name is Jonica, and our reader this evening is Julie C. Julie is muted. We're not ready.
I got you. My apologies.
That's all right.
Okay. The abilities you now possess are only shadows of your real strength. All of your present functions are divided and open to question and doubt. This is because you are not certain how you will use them and are therefore incapable of knowledge. You are also incapable of knowledge because you can still perceive lovelessly. Perception did not exist until the separation introduced degrees, aspects, and intervals. Spirit has no levels, and all conflict arises from the concept of levels. Only the levels of the Trinity are capable of unity. The levels created by the separation cannot but conflict. This is because they are meaningless to each other.
Mm-hmm. So it starts out talking about abilities. This is referred to often in the course. What do we mean by abilities? You could think of it as all the things you know how to do. Like you have the ability to drive a car, you have ability to write a letter, you have the ability to read a book, you have the ability to make phone call and call someone up and tell them you care about them. You didn't have those abilities at 2 years old. We acquire these abilities. And as we acquire them in life, frequently we don't know what they're for. And oftentimes we develop abilities in order to create an ego identity. Maybe it's an ability that will try to impress people or make you feel better than someone. So abilities can be confusing as to what are they for. And this leads to the, but they can also be repurposed for your higher self. So abilities are shadows of your real strength. But when the mind is confused as to what to use the abilities for, it will lead them to question and doubt what. And so this leads into a state of not being certain, of being confused. This is ultimately can result in existential confusion, an existential vacuum, and perceiving life lovelessly through a loveless lens. So, how did that all come about? How did we get there? Well, we want to talk about the levels. And it all begins with and there's much confusion about the levels. Our beginning point for this will be the separation. know that three levels: pure spirit, eternal spirit; universal mind, all the layers of mind, were many layer levels. We're going to elaborate on this. And third level would be the material level: the earth, the sand, the rocks, your bodies, everything that contains atoms, all the sun and stars. Well, couple principles to understand, easy to understand. Spirit has no levels. Spirit is all integrated, no levels. But all conflict arises from the concept of levels. This is going to lead to level confusion. All conflict arises from the concepts of levels and the confusion around them. This one statement should grab your attention if you understand it the way I do. When they say all conflict, we mean all conflict arises from the levels. So that should get your attention, because that means if I don't understand the levels, then I don't really understand what is causing the conflict, and therefore I can't recognize the problem so it can be solved. I'm caught in a trap. Okay. Second principle: the Trinity has levels. This was our quiz in the previous session. The Trinity, the levels of the Trinity, only at that level are they capable of perfect oneness, perfect unification. That's the level on which, on the levels of the Trinity, there's no conflict. They all are in perfect eternal harmony. Outside of the levels of the Trinity, there's all this confusion. And point number three: these levels that are created by the separation are inherently in conflict. Goes back to this point here: all conflict arises from the concept of levels. The levels by the separation cannot but be in conflict. Why? Because they stand for different principles. They have different operating systems, would be the best way I could say it. Each level has its own operating system, and people don't know that, and they assume the operating system, for instance, of the spirit applies to the body, or they assume that the operating system of the mind applies to the spirit. This is level confusion. They are different operating systems, and therefore, you could say they have a different language, a different code. The levels are meaningless to each other. Only the levels of the Trinity are capable of perfect unity. The levels created by the separation are inherently conflicting. And you and I, and make this personal, and then we show up in our body, we have our mind, and we're indwelt by this eternal spirit, and get very confused regarding those three levels. In fact, total confusion, in that even though we are an eternal spirit, we wind up forming an identity around the physical body that we have, and think that that's what we are, is a body, rather than eternal spirit. These are but some of the examples of level confusion. That's one of the chief errors that the Course helps us to learn to correct, because until you know what you are, you cannot know what your brother is. You cannot know what God is. You could say you don't know anything until you know what you are. All right. By the third slide, hopefully we can bring all this together. Julie?
Consciousness, the level of perception, was the first split introduced into the mind after the separation, making the mind a perceiver rather than a creator. Consciousness is correctly identified as the domain of the ego. The ego is a wrong-minded attempt to perceive yourself as you wish to be, rather than as you are. Yet you can know yourself only as you are, because that is all you can be sure of. Everything else is open to question.
Mhm. So we're just right now setting down certain attributes that arise as a result of this confusion of the levels. We'll try to tie it together. But like many things, the beginning won't be clear to you until we've reached the end. So there's a bit of confusion, not understandable. Don't see the full picture along the way, but hopefully by the end, it starts to gel, and that's where a review comes in. You can go back to the beginning and then understand the beginning. We don't have the time to go through all the material twice, but I recommend that you go through it again on your own after class. So the first split, we talk about splitting the mind. Consciousness is the level in which you apprehend the world and your existence. That's the first split introduced into the mind. There are other splits that we'll talk about, but this is the first one. It's the level of perception. And I'll illustrate these other splits in a moment, and which means that the mind is now reduced. I mean that word reduced from its higher estate of being a creator of love and peace and joy. It's now reduced to a confused state of trying to piece together little bits of information and figure out, who am I? What am I doing here? What's the purpose of my life? It's reduced to the level of perception. Consciousness is the domain of the ego. The ego operates in that confused state. It's based upon you taking a little bit of information and trying to create a view of the world, a view of yourself, a view of life out of your own experiences in life. The ego, this is not the way to get to the truth. This is a wrong-minded attempt, and it works at the level of what you think you are. It works at the level, we call it a false self system. It works at the level of the question of, what am I? And it's an effort to cobble together bits of information about yourself as you wish to be rather than as you are. And to try to understand this, to illustrate this, I think it's really easy to see in a teenager who is perhaps a little rebellious, doesn't want parents to tell them what to do, and is kind of going to dress differently and behave differently and form their own identity, try to define, go out on their own and make a lot independent self-concept from whatever it was that their family system of values and culture was. It's to perceive yourself as you wish to be rather than as you are. If you can see it in a teenager, trust me, the same process happens for adults of all ages, as they wish to view themselves as to think of themselves the way they prefer to think of themselves, not as they were created to be, not as they are in fact. And so this gets to the crux, the very center of the two different thought systems, the ego or the Holy Spirit's thought system, is about knowing yourself as you are. That is where the error goes in for the ego to distort your self-concept. And that is where the error must be corrected regarding what you are. Until we get to that, we can deal with lots of other issues around the ego, but we can't rid ourselves of ego confusion until we get to the centermost issue, which is what you are, because that's all you can be sure of. Everything else is a perception. It's open to question. Everything else is a stipulation, a hypothesis, a premise, which perception can only guess at, can only interpret it to be. All right. I want to pause, see if there's any questions. I know this is thick material. It has to do with your existential nature versus your ego identity in time and space. So the next slide is something that I put together, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Atisha?
Hi, Jenica. Yeah, I'm just wondering if this whole idea of us not really knowing who we are and being confused about that, I wonder if that's also the role that regret plays. So is that what we're doing, denying ourselves when we engage in regret and rumination?
Well, I'm going to answer that in a slightly different way, Atisha, and get to agreeing with what you said. I think we deny ourselves in 1,001 ways. And regret can be one of those ways, one of those symptoms. But the complexity of not knowing who we are results in many very creative, I think the course calls it ingenious attempts to make up a narrative that would explain what we are. And so all kinds of emotions and thoughts and theories stem from this, what Viktor Frankl called an existential vacuum. I don't have an answer, but I'm going to have to fill in something just to get by in life, and fill that vacuum by perceiving myself in the terms that I wish to perceive myself. And so, yes, regret can follow from all that as well, as well as 1,000 other feelings and thoughts that would leave one with discontent and lack of tranquility, lack of peace. All right, so the next slide is something that I've put together, and it needs explanation. I wouldn't expect you to follow all along with this without explanation, or it's not necessary you grasp the entire thing. But this is my attempt to visually illustrate the levels. And let me walk you through it. First of all, we said eternal spirit, there are no levels to eternal spirit. Eternal spirit is one. So all of us have originated from the Creator in a state of union, of oneness. That's a level, the spirit, but it's not split into levels itself. Spirit is perfectly united. Then there's this whole domain of mind that runs from the superconsciousness down to Christ's vision. We'll come back to that in a moment. That's all has to do with levels of the mind. And you can see there's a lot of levels there. And then but the third level, that in order to understand the levels, is the physical material world. This is everything that has an atom in it, including the tissues of your body, the cells of your body, is the material world. That is a level in itself. And so we have spirit, mind, and the material world of the body. Those are the three major categories. But we said that consciousness, the level of perception, was the first split that was introduced. There are many other splits. And these splits, by the way, this is the model that I extracted from A Course in Miracles. Other writers in psychology may attempt different models from this, but I've interpreted all this directly from the Course of Miracles. So, and for your purposes, and the way it's explained in the Course, we kind of take it from a top to bottom point of view, although that term should be held loosely. So at the highest level is what would be called your superconsciousness. This is your higher mind. This is the part of your mind that is shared with the Holy Spirit. This is your higher self. This is where the Course will teach you to pay attention to the voice that comes from the Holy Spirit, your higher self. That's one level. We like that. Then there's the level that we all operate in day to day, hour to hour. You're operating at this level right now. It's your conscious mind. You're aware of the sounds, your own thoughts. You're aware of words that are being shared here. You've got feelings, all of that going on, and it registers to you consciously. We're going to come back to how that is split in a second, but we want to go through the top level. Then there's a level below your conscious mind that's called the pre-conscious or superficial consciousness. Sometimes you get a glimpse of this right as you wake up. You realize your mind was talking to you while you were unconscious. Like there was actually, if you take a nap during the day and go out and then wake up, you'll realize your mind was still running. But it's not your conscious mind that was running. It was another layer in consciousness. And the pre-conscious is a darker realm. It's where all your unresolved issues get dumped. So if you get upset with yourself or someone else during the day, and you simply turn up the music loud to distract yourself, where does all that judgment and guilt go? It gets pushed out of your conscious mind because you distracted yourself, and it gets dumped. It becomes a container for the waste products of conflict and self-deception. And yeah, So that's your preconscious level. Underneath that is where the darkest zone of the ego. This is where my words for it. This is where the big lie resides. These are things, beliefs about yourself that you may have had since you were a child, and they aren't pretty. This is where all of a sense of loss and inadequacy, a sense of unlovability, a sense of not being good enough, a long term confusion about yourself resides. This is a, and the course calls this a foundation, but it's a false foundation. It's not the truth, but it becomes a foundation for your false self. Okay. I'm going through these kind of quick, but we'll do it again. Underneath that is where the true foundation lies. And there's two levels to that. One is the miracle level, and this is unconscious to your mind until we clear out this darker level. The miracle level remains repressed or down below the false foundation, but there's a fountain of miracles within you that wants to well up. You were sent here to time and space for those miracles to express through you. And where do they come from? They come from the deepest level, which is the holy mind, the Christ mind within you. It's a level at which Christ has already united his human self and his divine self and indwells your mind with Christ's vision, with a sense of heaven within you. But that is the deepest level, and it takes a lot of clearing out of this dark area in order for that deep level to arise up into your conscious mind. So, to try to bring this to a conclusion, the miracles that are sponsored by the Christ mind within you, they want to express themselves into your life. This will bring forth happiness for yourself and a sense of peace and love for others, and others will respond to it. It's a good thing, but they are blocked by an inner obstructions in the unconscious mind that where we call it a darkened prison. And it's all, this is what the work of this program is to empty out this layer. You don't need it at all. And so a healthy person that is healthy in the sense of walking in a state of grace and innocence and light, this area is gone, and the light of miracles springs freely into the conscious mind, and you become miracle minded, and miracles are natural. You wind up being prompted to do good for others in each day. Until we clear out this level, the ego and the Holy Spirit are both attempting to communicate to your conscious mind. This is the final point, but probably the most important point of them all, because your conscious mind is where you're aware of. As you go through this program, you're going to be dealing with this. You're going to have thoughts that percolate up from the lower levels that tell you, like, you're not lovable, or you're guilty, or the other person is guilty, or you'll be afraid, all that. So the ego will seek to creep in and dominate your conscious mind. At the same time, the Holy Spirit will patiently and gently stand in her position and offer you a corrective guidance if you invite her. And so you can imagine that these two parts of the conscious mind have entirely different objectives. And didn't we just say a moment ago that all conflict arises from the concept of levels, that the levels created by the separation cannot but conflict because of that ego domain, and all that confusion is in conflict with the promptings of the Holy Spirit. And why? Because the messaging system is entirely different. Everything the ego says means nothing to the Holy Spirit. And likewise, everything the Holy Spirit says means nothing to the ego. So that is the basis for the confusion. And into this state, people are supposed to learn to love one another. Well, the Course says that that will be obscured or interfered with due to conflict, lack of peace, and which arises from all of the content. So all the content in the subconscious mind, the Course teaches that these levels are unnecessary. And this program is designed to undo, to relinquish, to disempower these levels. So you no longer push unresolved conflicts out of your mind and into your preconscious mind. You no longer hold the big lie deep in your own subconscious. You come to know the truth about yourself, which replaces the big lie. Okay. Susie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so this is the sentence from the previous slide. And it like took me really a long time to truly understand this, but the ego is a wrong-minded attempt to perceive to perceive yourself as you wish to be, which is, but go back to the next one, go back to the levels, which is down there in my story, that's who I think I am, and that's who I, wish I would, that's who I think I am, but now so wish to be rather than as you are. So that sentence is just so applicable to this, because I'm you can't see my pointer, right? Like my down there in the pink and there. But what I love is the Holy Spirit waits for me so I can know myself as who I really am.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it took me a long time to realize that all of that is just who I thought I was and the story I made up about myself, and I was sticking to it, and yeah, I don't know. That sentence, the slide before, just really rang true for me when you were going through the levels.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can't know who I really am in that pink, red, whatever that is.
Right.
But I believe in the lower level where the miracles are trying to get up.
Yes. Yeah, there's not a single thing that emerges out of this domain that is true. At
Right.
best, it can, whatever illusion you have about yourself, it can give you a different illusion to believe in, but it can never be the source of truth. All right, so just one aside, this is really more advanced stuff. And again, I would encourage you to review later after we've finished the material so that perhaps by the time we get to the end, it becomes more clear. Let's go on.
The ego is the questioning aspect of the post-separation self, which was made rather than created. It is capable of asking questions, but not of perceiving meaningful answers, because these would involve knowledge and cannot be perceived. The mind is therefore confused, because only one-mindedness can be without confusion. A separated or divided mind must be confused. It is necessarily uncertain about what it is. It has to be in conflict because it is out of accord with itself. This makes its aspects strangers to each other, and this is the essence of the fear-prone condition in which attack is always possible. You have every reason to feel afraid as you perceive yourself. This is why you cannot escape from fear until you realize that you did not and could not create yourself. You can never make your misperceptions true, and your creation is beyond your own error. That is why you must eventually choose to heal the separation.
Hmm. It just strikes me the whole journey could be understood just by understanding this paragraph. So let's pick it up at the divided mind must be confused because it's uncertain about what it is. It has to be in conflict. This is lack of peace. The goal of this course is to help you attain inner peace, which then will be reflected outward into peaceful relationships with others. But you cannot attain inner peace when in conflict. And it begins in the mind. The mind is the area where that conflict is occurring. And it's because the mind is out of accord with itself. You know how in the conscious mind, we showed that it's not exactly one half. This is just a graphic depiction, but the ego is seeking to dominate the conscious mind, and the Holy Spirit is gently offering refreshing insights and holy perceptions. These two are in conflict and therefore puts your mind in a state of conflict. This is the essence where they become strangers to each other, and that creates fear from the ego, not from the Holy Spirit. That the ego becomes afraid of this other voice that you might abandon the ego and listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit. So it amplifies its fears in order to keep your attention. And so this is, I think, perhaps it's hard to believe, but this is the essence. This is the central point where the error occurs. You cannot escape from fear until you realize that you did not and could not create yourself. Let me illustrate that. These lies that stem from the unconscious mind that attempt to tell you what you are. Susie just referred to it, that it was an identity that she had acquired in the world That lie is inevitably creates fear in the mind, and you can't escape it until you use your willpower of your mind to relinquish that lie. Let me say it another way. As a result of believing in a lie for 30, 40, 50 years, your mind has a strong grip on it. It's gotten used to it. And until you willingly release that lie from your belief system, it will continue to hold its position. And so, and fear will result, and you can not escape from that fear until you realize that you did not come from that lie. That lie did not, which has miscreated an image for you. That is not what you are. You did not, when we say you did not create yourself, what we mean is your big lie is not the author of who you are. This is the authority problem, the question of authorship. You can never make these lies, these misperceptions true. And in truth, your creation by the Creator is beyond error. You were created by the Creator. There's no question about what you are, because it's not prone to error. So this is the central lie that has to be undone, and it requires your willpower to work in conjunction with the Holy Spirit's guidance to free yourself of these decades old. These lies were in this world thousands of years before you arrived. When we say the big lie, this is an ancient lie. This is a lie that you are unlovable, that you are from dust. What is it? From dust you have arose, from dust you shall return. That's the idea, that you arose from dust, that dust was your creator, if you want to believe that. So like I say, those are ancient set of lies, and they're embedded in the mythological systems of every religion, because they are by themselves thousands of years old, and the people that wrote about them did the best they could. They tried to explain it the best they understood and embedded those concepts, those mythologies in there. And so even in the religious teachings, this confusion is often perpetuated. All right, I got to get off of my stump here and take questions. David?
Oh, Jonica, no, don't ever get off your stump. This is just amazingly healing work. I don't know if you remembered 3 weeks ago, I had a little bit of a crisis on the weekend. I don't know, it was a Saturday, and I said, Jonica, I'm really struggling with this. I'm so angry at my sister and brother-in-law, and I can't forgive them, because on one level, the physical level, there's a reality to what happened. But on the other two levels, that isn't true. So the truths are different on the different levels.
Very good.
And I was so struggling with that, because the truths are so opposite. How did I reconcile that? And, I've had so many miracles every day happen since then. The illusions that are being revealed I don't even know what happened, but I do know that when I came up against it, I had to go under the covers for a couple of days and really get onto terms of who am I? Who am I? What am I? And I really got very clear on that, and the lessons were very helpful. The lessons are just incredible. The last month has been amazing. I feel like they've been so personal every day. It's just guided me through this path. And it was very clear that my purpose is to extend and reflect the light of my Father. And that's my identity, and that's all that matters. And all the other stuff just seems to, I don't even know what happens. The whole world changes. So I'm just so grateful for you for that. And I love it because it's an identity issue. Who am I? And I know who I want to be, and I know how I feel when I look at an animal, and that love, that's really who we all truly are, I think. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Susie?
Yeah, so I just wanted to put this on a really practical level because it says it's a practical course, right? And so I had this like huge aha moment this morning after doing my lesson. So the big lie for me, besides this mythical, whatever, is this big story I had around something that happened to me, in my physical life, and all the thoughts I had around it, and all the stuff all the fear. I'll just put fear as one big blanket, right? And we know there's so many emotions under fear. And then I completely had the understanding that it was all of my own making. But the lesson today is forgiveness is my function, right? And the lesson somehow today helped me realize, oh, I get that I've made this story, I've gotten it for years, but now I have to truly forgive all the thoughts I miscreated about my illusion, because none of it is true. And so, and I knew that, John. I go through some of these years, but today I got it. Forgive my mind, forgive my thoughts. It's just a mistake. No big deal. But until I can really forgive myself for making, somehow my suffering will still occur.
Yes.
So it was like this explosion of a holy instant, like, oh man, by George, I've got it. Like but it's just an amazing feeling. Like I am certain, I have certainty now that it's just, oh, what I made up. And I don't have to be in any of those fear, regrets, everything everybody's mentioning, because I just have to ask the Holy Spirit to help me forgive myself. And I swear, poof. So I just wanted to share that because it's taken me a while, to really understand the root cause, and then to understand I must forgive myself.
That is this final message. It's really I try to move it up to the first place, but it also will always also be found as the last message. I've forgiven. Somebody said it just recently. I won't mention names or anything. I've forgiven everybody else but myself. And that is because the biggest lie is the one that we tell about ourselves. Let's go on.
Right-mindedness is not to be confused with the knowing mind, because it is applicable only to right perception. You can be right-minded or wrong-minded, and even this is subject to degrees, clearly demonstrating that knowledge is not involved. The term right-mindedness is properly used as the correction for wrong-mindedness, and applies to the state of mind that induces accurate perception. It is miracle-minded because it heals misperception And this is indeed a miracle in view of how you perceive yourself.
Mhm. So, we often refer to this journey from ego identity to holy identity as a journey of 1,000 steps. Here, it expresses it as even this is subject to degrees. We take it 1 degree at a time, rather than the concept of all of a sudden I woke up one day and I'm perfectly healed. Like one quantum gigantic jump, and I wake up and I'm a different person. It's subject to degrees of right mindedness or wrong mindedness. And this is turns out to be the more gentle way. It gives you time to adapt to your journey and letting go at the pace that you're willing to let go of. But do know that we're cautioned many times we don't want to delay in the journey. Yes, it will unfold one experience, one miracle at a time, but we don't want to waste time or lose time along that journey. Julie?
Perception always involves some misuse of mind because it brings the mind into areas of uncertainty. The mind is very active. When it chooses to be separated, it chooses to perceive. Until then, it wills only to know. Afterwards, it can only choose ambiguously, and the only way out of ambiguity is clear perception. The mind returns to its proper function only when it wills to know. This places it in the service of spirit, where perception is changed. The mind chooses to divide itself when it chooses to make its own levels, but it could not entirely separate itself from spirit, because it is from spirit that it derives its whole power to make or create. Even in miscreation, the mind is affirming its source, or it would merely cease to be. This is impossible because the mind belongs to the spirit which God created and which is therefore eternal.
So, commentary here is that the mind chooses to be separated, and chooses to perceive, and then gets gets used to its own cooking. It would be the folk way of saying it. You get used to your own shtick. You get used to your own lie, and there's a tendency for people to numb out, to become passive, to just live in their ancient prison, to give up hope and faith. There's that possibility is there, and you see examples of it in the world. But the only device for returning the mind to its proper wholesome and holy status is your willpower. The mind returns when it wants to be free, when it wants love over fear and is willing to do what is necessary to rid oneself of fear and return to love. Your willpower, even you can see it even when you do your lessons. I don't know about you, but many times I was aware it was time to do my lesson, but I wasn't altogether willing. I felt like, oh, maybe I'll just skip today, or maybe I'll just do something else rather than do this less. And right in that moment, it's a matter because I'm not a highly disciplined person, and I'm going to do something anyway, like the people that get up and exercise at 5 a.m. every morning. I'm not one of them. I'm more one to let myself off the hook, and just be a little easier about it all. And so when it comes to doing those lessons, not anymore, because now I look forward to it with joy. It's part of best part of my day is in the morning doing the lessons. But I know what it feels like to be ambivalent towards this, to not, and here's what it is, to not care enough about myself to try. After all, the big lie, if I listen to the big lie, there's not a lot to love there coming out of that messaging system. I mean, that would be just assume give up, lose hope. And so willpower, this is, we can teach, I'm convinced that we can teach people to understand A Course in Miracles. But each and every day, the application is up to your willpower. And it will always be in your hands to decide whether or not your life is worthy of the effort to become free, to live in peace, to be happy. Because passivity will result in perpetuating the past. Susie?
I just wanted to share something quickly because you said something about working out. I used to be a gym rat, and that was the thing that I did first thing in the morning, or I would never wake up at 5 a.m. But, now, and I'm not advocating not working out by any means, but I been doing this for so long and it's helped me so much. It's like you say, I have fallen in love with the lessons in the course, and I don't even work out half the time anymore. It's just not a priority for me. Like this is my priority every single morning. And then if I have time for whatever else I have, that's what I have time for. And my mind is probably the most healed it's ever been. And so I know now that nothing outside, nothing is going to bring me peace. Only healing my mind, only healing my mind. And that dungeon and prison and that red level. So, yeah. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Susie. And you'll remember, those of you that were in attendance earlier sessions, that there's the power, willpower was given to you by your creator, but the ego seeks to imprison your will, seeks to numb your will so that you go passive and become ambivalent with regards to your life and your experience in this world. And so there's a push against your willpower that is based on the big lie that you're not worth it, would be the dark and cold version of that. Julie?
The ability to perceive made the body possible because you must perceive something and with something. That is why perception involves an exchange or translation, which knowledge does not need. The interpretive function of perception, a distorted form of creation, then permits you to interpret the body as yourself in an attempt to escape from the conflict you have induced. Spirit, which knows, could not be reconciled with this loss of power because it is incapable of darkness. This makes spirit almost inaccessible to the mind and entirely inaccessible to the body. Therefore, thereafter, spirit is perceived as a threat because light abolishes darkness merely by showing you it is not there. Truth will always overcome in this way. This cannot be an active process of correction because, as I have already emphasized, knowledge does not do anything. It can be perceived as an attacker, but it cannot attack. What you perceive as its attack is your own vague recognition that knowledge can always be remembered, never having been restored.
So all of this separation was no threat to spirit. Spirit remains intact. It's the one thing that has no levels. It's completely unified. But this loss of conscious power, of willpower, makes the spirit inaccessible to the mind. It creates a division between the identity that spirit holds for you and your mind's view of itself. This is a split. The mind has different notions, entertains a different narrative about yourself than the one that comes from spirit. And thereafter, now here's where it comes in. This really is the basis for great conflict. Thereafter, the spirit is perceived by the mind as a threat. Because we just said the mind entertains a different narrative about itself, one rooted in the ego's big lie, which is different than the narrative that the spirit has for you of love and light and holiness. I know I encountered it when I read Workbook Lesson 31. My mind is a part of God's. I am very holy. Well, my conscious mind could not accept that. That was threatening idea. It was too big. So spirit is perceived as a threat, and this leads ultimately to the fear of God. And from the ego's perspective, it was justified that the ego should be afraid of the messages coming from spirit. Because if your mind was to turn fully towards spirit for guidance, it would result in abandoning the ego, and that being nothing, that set of lies becomes meaningless. Susie has a way of saying, poof, it's all gone. That which a big lie that I carried around for decades of time means nothing to me anymore. It's all gone. So this can become severe, especially I've observed it in people working their first year in A Course in Miracles, where they become aware of not the theory that we're talking about here, but they become aware of two messages coming into their conscious mind. One is the one we're reading about here about love, and my mind is part of God's, is very holy. And the other one that's based on the big lie, and it's not loving, it's very cruel. And those two ideas both crossing your mind in the same minute or the same part of your thought stream is intense for people, and they often give up on themselves because they would rather not go through that kind of threat, that kind of conflict. But know that the source of all that is from the ego. The ego is attacking your higher self concept. These are what we call attack thoughts. Okay, we're going to wrap up here.
God and his creations remain in surety, and therefore know that no miscreation exists. The truth can deal with errors that you want.
One more time, Joy.
Truth cannot deal with errors that you want. I was a man who remembered spirit and its knowledge. As a man, I did not attempt to counteract error with knowledge, but to correct error from the bottom up. I demonstrated both the powerlessness of the body and the power of the mind. By uniting my will with that of my Creator, I naturally remembered spirit and its real purpose. I cannot unite your will with God's for you, but I can erase all misperceptions from your mind if you will bring it under my guidance. Only your misperceptions stand in your way. Without them, your choice is certain. Sane perception induces sane choosing. I called, but few are chosen, should be, all are called, but few choose to listen. Therefore, they do not choose right. The chosen ones are merely those who choose right sooner. Right minds can do this now, and they will find rest unto their souls. God knows you only in peace, and this is your reality.
This paragraph has had a great deal of influence on me and my sense of Course in Miracles, how I would approach it, how I work with it. And it has to do with what's said here in the first few sentences. First of all, everybody has a sense of they weren't perfectly loved as they were growing up. It wasn't perfect love. So there's a sense of lack of love. And that forms the basis of the big lie that you're not totally loved or that you're not loved at all. So truth cannot deal with errors that you want to keep. If the big lie, which has been rehearsed in each of our minds for decades of time, is so familiar, truth cannot overcome a lie you want to keep about yourself, a lie you want to keep telling. This is where we need to learn in the Course mind watching and to guard our thoughts so that we don't keep reverting to past lies about ourselves, or else if we do, we will reinforce them, and the truth cannot deal with the errors that we keep reinforcing. And then here's the insights that really woke me up. I was a man who remembered the spirit and knowledge. As a man, I did not attempt to counteract error with knowledge. I'll elaborate on here, but to correct error from the bottom up. So an attempt to correct error with knowledge, I want to give an example, but remain a little vague. Let's say there's a problem in a relationship and that I definitely contributed towards that misunderstanding, that problem. And you might think of this as a spiritual bypass. And then the person says, hey, we're having a problem. Let's talk about it. And I try to counteract the error with knowledge and say, everyone is perfect. Love will cure everything. There are no errors. Everything is bliss. So essentially trying to bury the error, the mistake, the problem, by evoking some statement of perfection, to counteract error with knowledge. Well, he says that's not the way that this program works. This program instead examines the error, realizes, let me recognize the problem so it can be solved. Let me recognize, oh, there's a judgment in my mind. There's a lack of love in my mind here, and then correct the error from the bottom up. Well, we tried to illustrate as best I could in pictures where correcting the error from the bottom up is that we go down and recognize that there's a big lie about ourself here that is the source of all the error, and correct the problem with that. That lie is not who I am. And so that means we have to, in order to heal, we have to be willing to recognize the confusion, all the hurts and pains and stories we tell about ourselves. We have to be willing to let that go willingly. And you cannot fix it yourself, nor can anyone else. We turn it over to the Holy Spirit. Say, Holy Spirit, this thing that I've been carrying for my entire life is too big for me. I do not know how to shed it, but I know that, and I trust you know how to heal my mind, and I'm asking for your help with this, and I'm placing this big lie in your hands because I've been working with it so long, and it's I can't free myself. So this is the process of correcting the error from the bottom up. And that's the way these sessions go. I think that's the entirety. No one who really has read and understood A Course in Miracles can say we're spiritual bypassing. In fact, we're here to get rid of every one of those lies so that once you do, the miracles percolate up into your conscious mind without any interference whatsoever. David?
Yeah, Jonica, that's the amazing thing about this program. The miracles just keep percolating up every day and dissolving. If I bring my mind under my Father's guidance, He erases all my misperceptions and illusions. I have a new word. What I love about this is it's like your mind unwraps one illusion, and it's such a revelation, and then you get another one, and it's like it just keeps going on. It's so wonderful. But I wanted to say, I got a new phrase from tonight, and it's not level confusion, but this means a lot to me. It's when I get in that state, it's identity confusion.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I?
Yes.
And I really love that. So that's kind of like, yeah, I realized I wasn't that now. Mm-hmm. Anyway, thank you, JC.
Yeah. It is identity. Very good, David. It is identity confusion. And just one thing in terms of terminology, Sri Ramana Maharshi was in India's most beloved guru, and he made the central to his practice the questioning oneself throughout the day. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? In order to address this issue of identity confusion. The Course reaffirms that principle as we've been talking about here, but it phrases it in terms of what am I? It's not who am I, David, Jonica, Susie, Lauren. It's not the who that we're looking to answer. It's the what we are. I am a child of God. I am a holy member of creation. We are a part of our Father's creation. We are an extension of his love. It's what we are. And that proves significant when you ask yourself about identity confusion, that you shift it to what am I? But thank you for that, pointing that out, David. Atisha?
Yeah, I just passed the lesson. I am as God created me.
Yes.
It's not exactly that, but it's like I am a creation of God, something along those lines. And I'm in the part of the lessons where it's encouraging us to kind of drop down from the head into a kind of feeling experience with the lesson, or more of a meditative experience. And I found that with that lesson, every time I repeated it, feeling it was effortless. It's like I had such a powerful experience, and it was so grounding every time I repeated the lesson. I didn't want to move on. I stayed on it for 3 days. Just because it feels like in those moments, it's like what you're teaching tonight, that levels were corrected every time I spoke that lesson to myself, or every time I experienced it. Yeah, that's all.
Oh, that's really helpful, Atisha. And that puts words to the way I experience it as well. It feels like in that moment, it's a holy instant. In that moment, it is all corrected. There's no, it's not an intellectual, it's a state of awareness that is not confused. And compared to being confused all day long, it feels really good. And there is a desire to remain there and not, whereas I used to be, after 10 minutes, I got other things to do, let's get the day going here. But with the love for that experience, I just want to stay there, double up the time. That talks about it in the workbook lessons. 10 minutes may not be enough. 20, take as long as it takes. What is time for? But to experience clarity regarding what life is all about and why you're here and what purpose we can serve in this life. All right. I want to real quickly, because we're going to let you go here, summarize some of the things that we read about today. The separation and the concept of levels are inherently conflicted. The ego has a different agenda, a different message than the Holy Spirit, and each of them finds the other's message to be meaningless. But the miracle this is what Atisha, it's in the next paragraph. The miracle adjusts it's a level adjustment power of the miracle, creates the right perception for healing. All healing rests on this fundamental correction and level perception. it always happens. Somebody says something and then it's repeated in the next paragraph. It's that feeling of everything is in its rightful place, the level adjustment power. And so uncertainty is an indication of a mind that is out of accord with itself, where the conscious mind can be torn between two different voices, two voices with two different choices. They become strangers to each other, and fear results from that. David, this is identity confusion. Well, what am I? If I've got the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the next, and both of them are reverbing in my mind, this is a moment of choice. You get to choose which one you identify with. And that's freedom compared to not being able to hear the voice of spirit and only being able to hear the message from the big lie. And so one of the things that we will need to talk about is establishing healthy boundaries with the levels and states to be able to recognize when you're being under the guidance of ego, and to how to react to that so that you don't remain entrapped. You don't, it's like if you walk into a bad scene, you got to really quick walk out. Because if you don't, it leads to errors in choosing and inappropriate behavior. And we cannot behave effectively while we're in this split condition. But as long as we are still divided, our will is going both directions, the only way we can correct it and heal is from the bottom up. To get rid of the big lie is, I think that's the ultimate, well, not ultimate, wrong word, to rid oneself of all the lies about yourself is a form of self-mastery. It's a great achievement if you can do it in this life, is to free yourself of all the lies that you've ever believed about yourself. And remember, if you believe a lie about somebody else, it's really one finger pointing out and the rest of the fingers pointing back. So it's really includes both the lies you tell yourself as well as the lies you tell about others. So for that, we have to learn to correct, and the Holy Spirit is our perfect teacher in learning how to correct the errors of these messages. That is all that we have time for today. That was a lot. That was a major undertaking there. Thank you for your attention. This is deep work. I admire your spiritual courage and your willingness to follow the Holy Spirit wherever she leads. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, Jonica.
You.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Julie, for reading.
Thank you.
All right, guys, have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Peace and love.
Good night.